So as we keep moving 102, we get to the idea of what do we need to run our operating systems. Remember, an operating system is the software that runs in the background. It's the thing, the software, that allows user software to run. So when I open OBS, when I open Notes, when I open Safari, when I open Firefox, when I do all of that, the thing, the software that allows all of those to run together, share the keyboard, share the mouse, share the monitor, is the operating system. In this case, it's Mac OS. Right over here, I have my Windows desktop, and Windows does the same thing. When I open OBS, when I open Firefox, when I open Outlook, when I open the calendar, all of those things have to share resources. And the thing, the software that manages that is the operating system. Now, the operating system itself needs resources. So when I open Firefox, when I have OBS recording this, when I'm doing all of those things, resources have to be shared, resources have to be managed. There are essentially three resources that you as a user need to be concerned about with your operating system. The first and the most important one of those is the processor. What kind of speed overall does the system run at? Next is memory, RAM. How much quick access, how much short-term storage and processing do I get? That's RAM. The next is long-term storage, hard drive space. How much files can I have? How many movies can I record? How much output can I store someplace? So those are the three most important things. Here at Rock Valley in our CIS department, we have these minimum benchmarks that we think will lead to a good operating environment for you. So I'll do this by operating system, and I'll give you 1, 2, 3, the processor, the RAM, and the storage. So we're going to start with Windows OS because far and away most of our users have Windows PCs. We suggest here at Rock Valley College in our CIS department, we suggest the following for minimums. The minimum is a 4-core processor. Dual core means that there are 2 cores. Quad core or 4-core means that there are 4 processing cores. You can share the load and things run, generally speaking, a little bit better. More cores don't necessarily translate to better performance. So 4 cores really is the sweet spot for for operating and then cost. When it comes to an Intel chip or an AMD chip, we suggest not getting anything older than an 11th generation. If you were going to buy something this year, 23, 24, don't buy anything older than what's called an 11th generation i5 if you are going to get an Intel processor, or a Ryzen 5 if you are going to get an AMD processor. Anything that is labeled Athlon, anything that is labeled, and I forget the name of the Ryzen processor right now, those are what are called Gold also. Those are low wattage, those are low bandwidth, those are low throughput, and will lead to not a great operating environment. As far as short-term storage, RAM, we suggest nothing less than 8 gigabytes. There are absolutely positively to this day, if I was to go to Best Buy online, you can see that right here behind me, I can get 2 and 4 gig of RAM on Windows systems. That will only lead to frustration. And as far as long-term storage, hard drive space, 256 gigs or more. So i5, 11th generation or newer, 8 gig of RAM, 256 or more. When you're looking at a Mac computer, don't get anything older than what is called an M1. An M1 processor came out in 2020. And although you can probably find a really good deal on an older used Mac, the M processors really are fantastic. I am running it off of one right now. My laptop is also an M series processor. They are fantastic. So an M1 and M2, those are really fantastic investments. Probably most of us don't need an M3. Those presently come with the more expensive machines, so an M1 or an M2, and don't worry about doing any upgrades from there. As far as the RAM goes, the short-term storage, 8 gigabytes is the minimum. And on a Mac, it gets really expensive really fast. So probably if you're just going to use it for light to moderate tasks, so I even consider doing video recording and video exporting later on a moderate task, 8 gigabytes of RAM is just fine. I have a Mac Mini right here. It's an M1 Mac Mini from 2020, and I do most of the editing and exporting here for these videos for Rock Valley College on there, and it does an amazing job as far as I'm concerned. Storage space is the same across the board. For long-term storage and hard drive space, we suggest 256 gigabytes of storage. So M series or greater, so anything after 2020. 8 gigabytes is the sweet spot. You don't have to pay for extra, and 256 gigabytes of storage or more. When it comes to a Chromebook, this is where things get a little different. Our 8 gig, 256 stays the same over on the Windows side. You're going to struggle to find a 256 gigabyte storage of long-term storage hard drive for a Chromebook. Honestly, on a Chromebook, it doesn't make as much of a difference because most of the things you're going to have are going to be stored in the cloud. These are the settings that we suggest, or the minimum requirements that we suggest for a Chromebook, lead to an overall good operating experience. If you can find, it is called an Intel Core i3 or i5. Those are going to have a really good, fast, snappy performance. If you can find a Chromebook with 8 gigabytes of RAM, that is going to be good, but for sure nothing less than 4 gigabytes of RAM. That tends to work pretty well for Chromebooks. And as far as storage goes, you don't get a lot of options, but if you can find 128 gigabytes of storage, that means certainly you will never run out. A quick note here on software, which I know this is operating system, it's not necessarily software. If you know that you need purpose-built software, if you know that you're going to do photo editing, if you know that you're going to do video editing, if you know that you're going to do music composition, things of that, it is really tough to recommend software on a Chromebook that will meet your growing needs. There might be really basic needs that could be met there, but intermediate, advanced needs are really tough to recommend a Chromebook. When it comes to, software and the applications that we use here at Rock Valley College, if you can afford it, a cheap Windows laptop is a better investment than a cheap Chromebook because at least you'll have the opportunity to install the software you need. So that's something to consider. So across all three of our operating systems, Windows, Mac, and Chrome OS, 8 gigabytes of RAM is the sweet spot. A moderate processor, 4 cores, is the sweet spot. In Windows, an M series processor, M1, M2, M3 in a MacBook, and an I series processor, i3, i5, i7 in a Chromebook. Storage, again, 256 or more, unless you're in a Chromebook, 128 gigabytes will do.